If you've been following me for any amount of time, you might know that I am a person with a lot of dogs. Less than I normally have. I only have 8. I did at one point in time have 19. Now I only have 8. And if you were thinking to yourself, wow, 8 seems crazy, how does she do it? I thought maybe today would be a good time to tell you, give you a behind the scenes of what it's like to live with a pack of dogs, a bunch of dogs, and maybe just kind of take you through my day, like how my dogs sort of live with me, and bonus episode because I am currently going through a bit of what I would call toothy disagreements that my 2 intact males have had. I'm going to talk about why they had the disagreement. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing about the disagreement and all the stuff in between. So if you ever wanted to know what it's like to live with a bunch of dogs, or if you're someone that does have multiple dogs and you've been struggling with maybe your own toothy disagreements, this is an episode for you. Buckle in. We're doing a day in the life with Tracy Franken. Let's get into it.
Are you worried that your fearful dog may hurt someone or something else? Do you have to prepare just to take a walk around the block? Hi, I'm Tracy, and I too had that dog. The one that you could only walk at nighttime when no one else was around. And I felt ashamed, and oh gosh, I wish that people could just see the dog that I know and love. I wanted the confidence to be able to walk my dog and not have to worry about who or what was around the corner. And I kept telling myself that if I just keep doing obedience drills and distracting with treats, that things would get better. Until I found the secret. Fear is not something that you can train out of a dog. In this podcast, you will find tips to help build your dog's confidence naturally, communication and understanding to foster that trust, and how to address those fear-based behaviors effectively so that you can enjoy a stress-free life with your dog. So if you're ready, stop chopping those chicken wieners, grab your notebook, and let's get to it.
Well, hello there, my fellow dog-loving friend. It's Tracy, Beyond Obedience. Oh, I'm really glad that you're here. I don't know what came over me, but I felt it in my heart to share what's going on in my life right now, because I never want to come across as someone who's got it all together when it comes to living with dogs, right? I am just as much a student as I am a teacher when it comes to living with dogs. I'm learning every single day. And so I wanted to share a little bit of a day in the life of what it's like to live with, with me, with my dogs, what that is like, how I move through my day with my dogs, how I show up for my dogs, what that looks like. And so a little bit of background. Let's set the scene a little bit before we get into it. I am married, so I have a husband, and I have 3 kids, all of which are still living in my house. Now, my kids all, like, you have to think about when you're talking about pack dynamics, and if you're offended by the word pack, suck it. No, I'm just kidding. Where did that come from? No, if you're offended by the word pack just means group of dogs, right? I know you aren't offended by it because you're listening to this podcast. I've been attacked online by the word pack, and I'm like, oh, please, semantics, potato, Jesus, doesn't matter. Anyway, so when we're talking about it, though, and I think this is the first core concept that I want you to understand, especially as someone who lives with multiple dogs, that we have to encompass everybody's unique personality, including my human beings, my skin babies, my fur babies and my skin babies. Oh, I can't even, when I said it, it hurt. If you missed that episode, check out, I think it was the episode on leadership. I mentioned about fur babies. Maybe it was not, it was relation. It doesn't matter. Check out all the episodes. The one on leadership and relevant and relationship styles are like, I really love those episodes. Anyway, I digress. So I have to consider everybody's personality when it comes to the fact that we all live under the same roof. So, for example, the personality types in my house, I have my oldest son is not really into dogs. He likes our dogs and whatnot, but he's not he's not really into dogs. We could probably sneak a dog in the house and it would take him a while to figure out that we got a new dog, that kind of thing, right? He's more into his video games. My youngest, though, has what he calls, quote unquote, his dog. And I will say, because of that label that my son has done, and I've allowed him to do it, but we've had to make some adjustments because of that label. Okay. This is actually a very tactical episode. Now that I'm going to break this down a lot, this might be noteworthy. So he might want to grab a pen and a paper. Because of that label that is put on that particular dog, my son calls him his dog. My son has asked that he sleep in his room. It changes the pack dynamic. Okay. Now I've made adjustments to accommodate that, but I will say for many people, if you have let's say, two people that just got together and they each have a dog. If you have a my dog versus your dog, this is my dog and this is my dog, you may be setting yourself up for some trouble. Okay. Once we all come under the same roof, we have to consider everybody. We are a pro-social pack. Pro-social simply means we're better together. That's why I love it so much. We're better together. Pro-social, we're better together, right? This isn't an us versus them dynamic. And we have to be very careful when living with multiple dogs that we work hard to create this pro-social relationship with our dogs, because dogs very much will turn us versus them. That's why your dog is barking at all the other dogs that walk down the street, because they're not part of your family. They're not part of your pack. They're a potential threat. We don't want to create that within our own home. Okay. So that's why I have to take in the personalities of everybody, and we've made some adjustments, and I'll talk about that. So the characters in this particular pack in our house currently right now, we have Irie, which is quote unquote my son Connor's dog. Not really, but we let him think that, right? It's his dog, but Irie likes to stay in Connor's room, right? It creates conflict, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Irie is an intact Australian Shepherd male. Actually, you should probably take notes just so you know what characters I'm talking about. Then we have Nigel, which is an intact Newfoundland dog. Okay. So we have two intact male dogs in this pack. We have Rue, who is our spayed female Australian Shepherd. We have Dakota, who is a spayed female Newf as well. And then we have Nike, our unspayed Jack Russell Terrier, who will soon to be spayed. Okay. So those are the 5 characters. Okay. And we've made a point of talking about how Irie, my son, has claimed him as his dog, and Irie sleeps in his room. And we're going to talk about why that's a problem and why it's a problem now. Okay. So let me first give you sort of a day in the life of me. I'm going to go over that really quickly first. So what happens for us when I wake up in the morning is I generally am the one that will feed the dogs. Sometimes my husband lets me sleep in and he feeds the dogs. But my husband, I should also mention this. My husband has claimed, how did I forget that? My husband claims that Nike is his dog, because he loves small dogs. So the moment we got Nike, he's like, well, finally you got a dog that's more my style. He loves small dogs. So he's like, Nike's my dog. And he loves Nike and he babies Nike, and it's a whole thing. Okay. So Mark will get up usually before me and he will feed Nike. Now, personally, I wouldn't do that. But again, you have to pick your battles. You have to pick your battles. But this is why I have to make adjustments for the pack mentality. Okay. So with this, Mark gets up, he feeds Nike. Then I will usually get up and I will feed the rest of the dogs. Now, usually that means that I will go downstairs. I will prep the dogs breakfast. I will get the dogs to come downstairs with me. Now, breakfast and eating is an excited time. I will allow Rue, Nigel, and Dakota to kind of run down the hallway, but I will intentionally wait for them to get all the way down the stairs, and then I will ask Irie to walk beside me as calmly as he can while we go down the hallway and down the stairs. Why do I do that? Because Irie has not spent the night with the rest of the dogs, and it has created an us versus them. He becomes, by association, by room, not part of the morning pack, right? I can't just open up the door and let him run out with the others because, one, he's banana beans crazy. And I'm going to say this as a sidebar. I did not raise this dog. He was a rehome for us. We got him at 1.5 years. I did not raise this dog. And he does have some behaviors, especially around food, that I personally am not a fan of. But that's obviously, that excitement created around food was prior to me. So I make adjustments for that. So because he was in another room, he's got the label of my son's dog, and he's banana beans crazy. I make him walk down with me. He's got to walk with me. And if he bolts out ahead of me, I'll be like, no. And he has to stop and wait. Now, he is an Australian Shepherd. He's incredibly smart and he's incredibly obedient, and he does that. But he still has this internal energy of craziness. Even though he's doing the task, mentally, he's still going nuts. Okay. So then I grab the 4 bowls of food and I walk them to the door. I feed my dogs outside in a little yard outside. So I'll walk them to the door. I have to make sure that Irie does not run to the door and bark and do his craziness, because if he does, the combination of the door, food, and the excitement of the moment, the threshold and all of that stuff is what I would call a hot spot for disagreements. And where am I going to get disagreements? Between Irie, my intact Australian Shepherd, and Nigel, my intact male. If they bump into each other, if there's a little bit of a, like, Irie went in the wrong way or whatnot, there could be a little blah, blah, blah. Now, when I call them toothy disagreements, I call them toothy disagreements because when we call them fights, we have a negative connotation about it. I always call them toothy disagreements because that's essentially what they are. They're a disagreement, and dogs use their teeth, right? When we take away the language around it that makes it sound terrible, like the dogs are fighting, I'm like, they're having toothy disagreements because they're not serious. They're males. They're kind of, So that's a hot spot for me, and I always make sure that Irie's under control, and I control Irie. Why do I control Irie? Because Irie is the younger, intact male with unstable energy. That's why I control him. Remember, I said my Noof is very, very calm. He's very calm and laid back, which means his energy isn't the problem. It's Irie's energy. So I'm very intentional about who I'm controlling through that doorway. Then I put all the food down. I do it in an order where Nigel gets fed, then Dakota gets fed, then Irie and Rue take their food. They are fed in the same spot. I allow that kind of excitement. Occasionally, there has been a toothy disagreement during feeding, but it usually has to do with Irie dumps a food bowl, or he tries to get a piece of food that's near Nigel's food, something like that. And again, these are just little scuffles, like little it's all noise, just right? And if I have to, I'll go out and be like, knock it off. And then they do. Then I bring them upstairs. I let them outside into our backyard, and that's when I will let Nike out again. Mark's already fed her, so I'll let Nike out to go with the rest of the dogs. They do their perimeter check. I usually walk that perimeter with them. I've mentioned this before about walking perimeters. I will go out and walk that perimeter with them. We check the perimeter. We find some deer poop, all of that good stuff. Then we come in. I don't let the dogs play because we never let them play after they've eaten, because I have large dogs, and bloat issues, that can have bloat issues, that kind of thing. Then usually they come in. For me, what I have to do is I have to go do chores. So usually Irie is put back in his room and in Connor's room, and Nike is put in her crate, and I will go down and do chores. When I come back up, I do the same thing. I let the dogs out again when I come back up from chores. Chores usually take me anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending. And when I come back, we let them out again. And by then they've digested. So I let them play a little bit and they, do their thing. Then I come back in and then it's like, I do my stuff, make my lunch, whatever it is, right? I'm doing my stuff. The dogs kind of mill around. As soon as I sit down, all of my dogs relax because that's rest time. And then essentially the same thing around dinner time. When it's dinner time, I will feed Nike. I feed Nike in her crate. She gets fed. I do the exact same thing, the exact same feeding thing where I ask Irie to walk down the stairs, all of that stuff. That's my norm. Okay. That's my norm. And then throughout the day, I'm letting them out, spending some time with them, whatever. Sometimes I'm going out and I'm taking them for a car ride, whatever. There's different parts of the midday, but that morning routine and that nighttime routine are the same. At nighttime before bed, Irie always goes and stays with Connor. The rest of the dogs come into my room. We'll sometimes watch TV, yada, yada, yada. That's how that works. So that's the norm. Now, buckle in. Let's talk about what's happening right now. Okay. Because as I mentioned, I am always transparent about what's going on in my house and my pack, and things are not always sunshine and roses. If you have a group of dogs, things are not going to always be sunshine and roses. So if you missed the other episode where I talked about currently right now, Nike is in heat. Womp womp. I know. And again, I will mention again, don't come after me. I do not spay and neuter my dogs until they're a little bit older. I do that intentionally. That is a choice that I have made. I don't have to worry about accidental pregnancy in this case, because in all honesty, and I know probably someone's going to come out and be like, I heard a story of this, but in all honesty, we're very, very careful. And also it's practically impossible for Nigel to do anything. He's just way too big. It's also, anyway, we're careful. Let's just put it at that. Let's just leave it at that. So that's actually not the issue. But what the issue is now is when I have an intact female that is in heat with two intact males, the toothy disagreements that happen. So now, currently, here's what's happening, and here's how I address it. And the reason why I have to address it this way is because of the people in my house. And I can't take that away. Like I can't, obviously, I can't kick those kids out yet. I should. I can't. But also, I live with people, and that's the thing. And because of the people, I have to make some adjustments, and it's more on the dog side. So here's the thing. Here's what happened. Obviously, the excitement of the two males has caused the two males to be a little bit more confrontational. The other day, I don't know. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't there. It was Mark was there. So I'm not entirely sure, but I'm assuming Irie was probably sniffing Nike at the time. Nigel came over. Irie would have been like, get out of here. And that's when Nigel would be like, how dare you? Right? How dare you? And so there was a little bit of a toothy disagreement. Now, it was a lot of noise. There was a lot of noise and a lot of snapping, and some chunks of hair. Not necessarily because anything bad happened, but mostly because they're shedding a lot. So just hair came out. And Nigel bit his tongue. So originally it looked like there was some blood, but we were like, it was just he bit his tongue. But what ended up happening is my husband overreacted. And, afterwards, after the heat of the moment had calmed down, he was like, I guess I overreacted because our dogs don't ever fight. Like they very rarely do that. So I was shocked and I'm like, cool, I get it, but you overreacted. So he overreacted, which fed into the energy of the moment. I came out and I was more angry at the fact that my husband was freaking out. Like I was like, get a hold of yourself, Frank. Like we've been doing this for years. We ran a daycare. Like, come on. But he's got a point. Our dogs don't normally do this. So what happened after that is we had to do some separation, and it's just to make it easier on the humans, not necessarily for the dogs, to make it easier on the humans. So currently my new morning plan with the dogs is that Irie is now being fed in Connor's room. He's staying segregated in Connor's room for the large portion of the days because, I can't necessarily trust that, if I'm not there in the room watching them, that, stuff's going to get missed. That's the bottom line. Stuff's going to get missed. So why am I sharing that with you now is because what happens now, what we're doing right now is the preventative. And if you're ever in this position where you're like, I feel like my dogs are like, they're getting spicy or whatnot. First of all, always reach out to professionals in your area because you can't take my words on a podcast. I can't speak for your exact situation, but I want to talk about the overarching idea here is that when we have a conflict like that, when we have a toothy disagreement, it's going to be our natural inclination to separate the dogs. And you should for safety. And that's what we've done. We've separated the dogs so that, now Irie doesn't eat with those three. Irie eats in his room. And Irie also goes out with the group without Nike and Nigel. Like I'll let him out with Rue and Dakota. Then I'll bring like Irie in and then let Nigel out. And then I'll let Nike out with Rue and Dakota. Like I'm basically I now have 4 play groups kind of a thing because I don't want the dynamic of 2 intact males and an intact female because they've already had a toothy disagreement. So we've separated them and that's fine for now, but this too shall pass. Right? Nike is now coming out of heat. She's no longer in standing heat. She's in that part of the heat cycle where the boys still think that they like it, but she's like, get away from me or I'll rip your face off. She's at that stage. Ladies, you know the stage. I'll rip your face off right now. Don't touch me. That's where Nike's at in her heat cycle. So we're coming out the other side of this. So now what I am doing is now I have to find ways to integrate my pack back together. And I have to be strategic about it because I want to make sure that we're doing pro-social things together, but avoiding still the hot spots because there's still feelings in the air, right? They still have feelings that they might get lucky. They're not, but they might. So I have to be conscientious of that. So, for example, this morning I still fed Irie by himself. But now I have let out Irie, Nigel, Rue, and Dakota without Nike to let them like mingle around together outside. So that's my first step, right? Big spaces are better, right? Outside is better because there's not the confinement and there's not the hot spots. Right? Inside your house, there's hot spots. There's areas where the dogs have to squeeze through thresholds or smaller areas, and they're going to be like a little bit competitive there. There's the hot spots and the excitement around food. There's hot spots around you, right? Getting attention from you. You're a hot spot. So when I first start to bring him back, I'm going to use the great outdoors to be like, now you're out there together. Can we go for a perimeter check together with Irie and Nigel? And the thing was, they did it without even batting an eye. They were just like, you're here, I'm here, we're outside. It's a great day. Let's pee on this thing, pee on that thing. Let's pee on some stuff. They didn't care. But when I bring them back into the house, I'm going to watch that threshold, the first doorway. I'm going to watch it because coming through the doorway that's narrow, there can be some competitiveness there. So I may be a little bit more, like a little bit more discerning about who's going to go through that first, right? I'm going to make sure that we're not all rushing in. And then I have to be very careful because what's the first thing that they're going to do? They're going to walk through that door. They're going to go right over to Nike's crate, which is in our living room. And that crate and that little ball of hormones there is going to cause, that's a hot spot. So when I walked in with all of the dogs and Irie looked over at the crate and I went, keep walking, my man, like go to your room. And he had to keep going, right? And I put him back in his room. And then I went out with Nike, all that stuff, right? So that's my very first step is to just I got to get them back together in a way that's safe. My next step will be going for a walk together. Let's get on a leash. Let's go for a walk. Can you guys work together again? Can we forget about the hormone? I'm not going to have Nike, just the boys. Maybe just the boys and maybe Rue or somebody else, right? So we're going for a walk. Just the boys. Can we get back together? Let's work together. Then I'm going to slowly introduce them feeding together, but I got to be super careful about that high energy. As Nike's coming out of heat, I'm going to then introduce feeding them back together. Then I'm going to introduce them being out in the yard with Nike, right? When I know for sure that she's not smelling good or whatnot, but I'm going to be very careful. I'm not going to let like Irie go over to her and stand over top of her and lick her ears and do all the things that they do. I'm going to be very careful and discerning about all of that stuff. And I'm going to do it in a systematic way. So I'm bringing the pack back together. And eventually we're going to come back to the space of the dogs can be fed together. Everyone can go out together. Everybody can run around and play together. We'll get back there. But we have to be intentional about how we do it. Right? And we don't get so caught up in the emotion of, oh my gosh, the dogs had a fight. Like I literally am like, oh gosh. It's almost like friggin' dogs in heat and little scrappy, like toothy disagreements. That's how I live with these dogs. So if there comes a time when you have to separate, you need to come up with your game plan of, if you're planning on getting them back together. Now, caveat to all of this, if you've had dogs that are fighting and putting holes in one another, that's a whole different ballgame, my friend. And please heed my advice and say, go find a dog aggression specialist to help you with your hands-on stuff there. You shouldn't be getting advice from somebody on a podcast when you have dogs that are doing harm to one another. So if you're at that point where the toothy disagreements have actually required vet visits, that's a whole nother ballgame. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just arguments that dogs have. I don't know. What do you think about that? Did that help you at all? Sort of give you a little insight of what it's like to live with a group of dogs or live with me and a group of dogs? I hope that helps. Let me know. Give me some comments if you're on Spotify. Let me know if this podcast episode was worthwhile. Let me know in the Facebook group and Living Beyond Obedience. Let me know if you like this kind of stuff of what it's like, the behind the scenes, what it's like to live with me and my dogs. Because I can do more episodes on this. I can get a little bit more detailed on what it is that I do throughout the day, canine conversations that I have, and how I use my body, energy, intent, all of that stuff to have conversations. I can get into all of that if you want. Let me know if you like this. And if you like this episode also, please take some time, leave me a 5-star written review on Apple. It really does help. It pushes the podcast out to more and more people. And that's the goal. That's the goal. So let me know what you thought about that. And as always, get out there today and be the person that your dog thinks you are, because your dog thinks that you're amazing. And so do I. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is meant for entertainment and education purposes only and is not meant to replace hands-on professional training. If you're really struggling with your dog, please reach out to a professional in your area. Okay, I think that's it. Bye for now.